my perspective, it's mostly just scribble, like maybe purposeful scribble,
Yeah.
but it's, there's not a lot of brain work in my head.
Okay, just unconscious kind of.
Yeah, it
flowing.
just happens.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes, sir.
Do you have like it's hard to pinpoint like maybe one piece that you maybe that's happy with, but just among you and other artists too, is there like maybe like 2 or 3 works that really stick out in your mind that you really were?
Of my own, the ones that I'm enjoying most lately are the ones that Craig was mentioning. Was when I do cover recreations. Not that I'm especially proud to be doing them because they're kind of it feels on some days I think I'm being a little bit of a jerk, drawing what someone else already drew. But it's also the thing I do that makes me feel most like being a kid. When I would sit around, trying to copy Ross Andrew or Frank Frazetta or whoever else who I was really, really cool and keen on that particular day. So I just would go back and look at covers that I really liked, and sometimes people say, "Oh, you did a better job." And it's like, yeah, those guys drew theirs in an afternoon.
Right.
I drew mine in 3 or 4 weeks. So if mine didn't have at least something else about it, I'd suck pretty bad.
And you're recreating covers that you like, and there's a reason.
Mostly, yeah.
There's a reason.
And sometimes there's covers that I like the layout of, but I could tell that the original artist had a minute to do it.
Right.
So there's a cool idea, or there's a couple I think Frankenstein monster and the Avengers. Well, I gotta draw that. That's a no-brainer, right?
I think the moment I really appreciate what an inker brings to the job was he did an Excalibur issue. And we don't have to name the inker, but it started off, I think Terry Austin started doing the first one, and then partway through somebody massacred your work. Who were your favorite inkers to work with?
Well, for the Excalibur one, in defense of Terry, who did ink the whole thing.
No, it changed partway through it, didn't it?
Well, it partly changed because the editor moved my deadline, and often when the editor moves the deadline, it's a little further in the distance. This one, suddenly I had 2 weeks less.
Okay.
So there's probably about 6 pages in that book that I drew in a day.
Okay.
And they're not my best pages. And so as I said, the deadline was moved on me, so that meant it was also moved on Terry. So, there's a page in there that I drew in a half hour, so Terry probably didn't have much more than that to ink it.
Okay. I'm pretty sure there's somebody else, 2 guys who came in to
I
help.
don't think so. There's in Third Fantastic Four that's inked by more than one person.
Okay.
That's Al Milgram and me, and I think there's someone else, but I'm not absolutely sure now. And certainly in one of my X-Men books, it's inked by everybody who could hold a pen, because it was late.
You do most of your inking now, though, yourself?
I do most of it myself. I prefer myself. And it's not that I haven't had perfectly good inkers who've done perfectly good work on my pencils. I just find that when I'm inking myself, I'll make alterations that I would be enraged if an inker did. So what I do is well, that makes sense, right? But to be fair, inkers just wouldn't know what I had in mind.
Now, a fun fact, we had Arthur draw a cover for my book called The Perhapanauts several years ago, an image, and the artwork came in, I'm like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. I can't believe how awesome this was. I was over the moon. And then my partner Todd's like, yeah, this is fantastic. We should ask Art about buying the cover. And we asked him, and he's like, oh, I sold that a while ago. Oh, crap. So I emailed the guy who had bought the artwork, and he's like, yeah, I don't know what this book is, but I love it. And I'm like, if you ever want to sell it, he's like, nope. But if you ever do, no, I'm not going to sell it. So I was like, damn it.
I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
That was a big. Are you guys still doing that book?
Every now and then.
Every now and then, as you should. It was an awesome book. And did any cartoon stuff ever come of it, or?
Not.
Because it certainly should have.
And it was something that was up your alley. So it was monsters.
Yeah, totally. Bigfoot and yeah.
And that was we had our chance to get our idols to do stuff for us. So we got Art to do a cover, and
No, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure and an honor because I loved that book. It was really nice.
but that was.
I mean, I stopped reading it. I love it that much. There were things to do.
Once the check cleared, oh God. Any other questions? We've got plenty of time. Yes, sir.
Yeah, has there ever been a concept where everything just falls into place? I'm thinking of your adaptation of the Creature of Black Lagoon, which...
That's one where nothing fell into place. It was like a bit before the internet. At least the internet was everywhere, and I was late to the internet anyway because I'm me. But my friend Walter Simonson had a rule. I don't know if he still has it because we have the internet, of course. But his rule was whenever you need reference, it's completely unavailable. For instance, my now wife, but she was then my girlfriend, she was working on a book where the character needed to have a Humvee, which were like everywhere at some time. And then we went looking for magazines and books, nothing anywhere. Looking for toys, nothing anywhere. We finally found like a little toy, a little model that I built for her, which actually worked better. Like I could just build, the chassis and leave the body loose so she could take it apart and look on the inside. And so that worked out okay, but still it took us like way too long to find it. Then there was some other stuff. So on this case, I knew that Universal, probably not Universal, but they'd made them available. They published the scripts for a bunch of their Universal monster movies, and then they published some scripts for movies that were not made, like Dracula versus the Wolfman, and a couple of odd ones. So I knew this existed. So Dark Horse asked me to do it. I said, "Is there any way we can get a script?" No, Universal doesn't have a script. What about that book? Because the Dark Horse Comics is in Portland, Oregon, but they've got the biggest, greatest bookstore like in the world, Powell's Bookstore. So how about this book? Is that available? The script completely unavailable. Is there there was a novelization in the 50s or in the early 60s? Is that available? No, completely unavailable. The only thing I think we could find was a Gold Key comic book adaptation, which has almost nothing to do with the movie. At the end, the creature has like laid eggs like a tadpole on the bottom of an oil drum. So there's like at the very end, the scientists are looking like, what are we going to do with these Gilliman tadpoles? I don't know what that we're going to do with that. That's not in the movie though. What is that? So basically, I could find nothing. I had one good model from a company called Horizon. Fortunately, it was a very excellent model. And the videotape of the film. So I ended up watching the film for 2 minutes a day, every day, while I was working on the book for like 2 or 3 months. So basically, it was one of my favorite movies from when I was a kid. I couldn't watch it for about 5 years after that, because it was like just in my machine every day, just rewind, rewind. Madness.
Yes.
Have you ever did everything, just you, you did color?
I did a series called, well, I didn't color it though. I did a series called Monkeyman where I wrote it and drew and penciled it and inked it. And my friend Laura colored it. And she did a really great job. But I would like to do something more like that. There was some of my very earliest work when I was just thinking about becoming a comic book artist. I would do the whole thing. I would do watercolor on it, and I kind of like doing it. But the more layers you put on each piece of artwork, the more chances there are for things to go terribly, terribly wrong. And I'm sometimes timid.
And that's, when you're telling people to start out in comics,
Yeah.
Start with one thing. Don't write it, draw it, ink it, color it, letter it, because you're bound to.
Yeah.
But at this point in your career, you could probably do all that.
I could probably do that. And the
Get
very
away
first
with
thing
it.
I did for Marvel, which fortunately was never printed because it was god-awful, but they did a book called Bizarre Adventures, and I wrote and laid out like a 3 or 4 page, just a silly bit of nonsense. They sent in this, it was a full script and the layouts, and so I got a call from Denny O'Neil saying, "Who would you like to draw this?" I was like, "No, you don't understand. That's the part I want." I mean, if I was smarter now, I'd know. Because writers get away with everything. They make all the money. They do hardly any work. Am I right? You know.
Yeah.
You know.
Pages 7 through 10. Big fight.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right.
Exactly. So I should have done that. But anyway, I was like, no, I have to do it. So I did it. I penciled it. It was terrible. Joe Rubenstein, who kind of helped me get the job, inked it. It wasn't his best day, which it's fine. Everyone has their moments. Everyone's got to meet their deadlines and pay their bills. Basically, I did it and turned it in. The book got canceled, and I called them and said, "Hey, you got any more work for me?" He's like, "Yeah, we'll call you." So it was like almost another year before I did more samples, and then finally got Longshot.
And that was your first published work?
That was my first published
which
work. So I should say I was actually hired when I was 18 instead of 19, but the one I got hired for was 18. When I was 18, it was pretty terrible, so let that one slide.
Now, you were just talking about writing, and you've written your own stuff. Have you written for other artists?
I did on one Godzilla project. I can't remember whether it was 4 or 6 pages. And as I recall, the artist on it was, I can't remember his name now, unfortunately. And I did because the way I write, I'll do thumbnails for the pages and then write the dialogue and, a little description of if the thumbnail isn't clear enough. And unfortunately, he was crippled by my having done the thumbnails because I think he was overly impressed. And they're just thumbnails; they're not meant for publication. But he stuck to them way too closely.
Yeah.
So whatever odd thing I might have done in perspective was continued on, or whatever weird foreshortening, he didn't change it to make it his own. He left it, so it looked like really bad me. And he was a pretty good artist, so it did also look like not very good him.
Right.
It was Godzilla, no one cared.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you actually enjoy the writing part at all? Just kind of get that in your head.
There's parts of it I think I'm pretty good at it, and other parts, like the part that involves making a good story, I'm not very good at. But people just talking back and forth, I can do that. I like doing that. That's fun. And I could have been, never mind. So I think there's some parts that I'm decent at, and other parts I don't think I'm very good at. But I think in another year or two, when I'm grown up, as I mentioned, it'll all come together.
Yes, sir.
Do you have any interest in working in like video games or animation, anything outside of comics?
Sure. As I mentioned, the whole mortgage,
Yeah.
8-year-old daughter. Yeah, I'm happy for work.
Have you ever been approached for routes ever like that?
For video game stuff, not so much. No, there's been bits of movie stuff that I've done that'll never be seen. It's just for projects that didn't go through. Like I did one for Disney that was very similar to. Apparently, Disney does this all the time. Where they'll have 2 or 3 teams working on kind of the same idea, and so we were working on one that would have been along the same lines as Wreck-It Ralph. But I didn't work on Wreck-It Ralph at all. But it would have been called something totally different, and looked quite different. But it was kind of similar ideas.
Are there any characters or properties that you haven't done, like in a comic, maybe a commission that you would like to do, that you were like, oh, I wish you had the time to do a cover? or something?
Not that I can think of. I should be working more on my own stuff. But there's just a part of me that loves all those old characters. So I'm always drawn to that kind of stuff.
Now, is some of your other stuff like Monkeyman and O'Brien, is that in print still, or is it?
It's not. No, we should. The
get on that.
publisher keeps asking me to do something like new covers or like a new short story to help freshen it up and make it possible for people to have to buy the same crap again for no really good reason.
Now, have all you guys seen or read Monkeyman and O'Brien? Yeah. See, it's awesome.
I should do.
Get on that
I
right
should
now.
totally do that. Right now, I'm leaving.
In the back, sir.
You've worked with most of the major publishers at this point, Dark Horse, Marvel, DC. Anybody you've really enjoyed more so than the other? Like, do you like working with Dark Horse and Image maybe more than the...
I like a lot of the people at Dark. Fortunately, I just get along with most of the people I've worked with. So I like a lot of the people at Dark Horse Comics. I like a lot of the people at DC Comics. It's actually quite odd. I don't know a lot of people at Marvel, but Marvel is the thing that I liked mostly when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Right? So, the people I do know at Marvel, I like quite a lot. And it's also sometimes the things that people are used to just from people who buy stuff. Like most of the people who come to my table would rather get something involving the X-Men than they would something involving the Justice League of America. As much as I might like Justice League, that's just not what people are interested to get from me. Not that there wouldn't be somebody, just Marvel stuff moves better for me. So just kind of from a financial point of view, it tends to make more sense for me to lean more towards Marvel.
And you've been busy doing a lot of variant covers for Marvel.
Yeah, they have me do that, yeah. And I just did a bunch for Mr. Campbell as well, for Scott Campbell, for his company, doing the variants. So I just did a bunch of Wolverines for him, which will be available in New York.
Shameless plug right there. I like that. Yes, sir.
I saw some pages online a couple of years ago, I guess, of Batman interiors. If you
Oh, sure.
planned that, like, whatever, is that project totally?
Yeah,
planned, or
it's a bit, that one's a bit of a disappointment. That was, I was supposed to take over with Jeff Loeb. We were gonna take over the All-Star Batman after Jim and Frank were done. And Jim and Frank never got done, ever. I think that job was never finished, right?
I don't think so.
I don't think they ever wrapped up that story. So we were gonna follow them immediately after they did their 6 issues. So I was plugging away, and they kept on saying, oh, Frank and Jim are gonna go another issue. I was like, all right, I'm gonna take my time because I wanna make this really good. And then Jeff Loeb got hired by Marvel, but part of his Marvel contract was that he could finish this project with me at DC. And so Jeff would be like writing their like flagship stuff and still writing All-Star Batman. And DC was like not cool with that. They were like, no, you got to pick one or the other. And Jeff was like,
Bye-bye.
bye. And so the only reason I was doing it was to work with Jeff. And so they offered to find a way to use it or to like find another writer. It's like, no, I thought the whole reason I was doing it was to work with Jeff. So I'm sorry that didn't get done. And I'm mostly to blame. I mean, I took a really long time to do it. If we just kept chugging away as if I was a real boy, then we would have had a bunch of issues, and we could have probably called it something else. But the whole point was to write on Frank and Jim's coattails, so I could do as little work as possible. Right? That's the whole deal.
Now, you've also worked on Jonni Future?
Yeah.
Well, that was at,
For ABC Comics, which was actually Wildstorm Comics, which was then owned by DC Comics. It was complicated, mostly for Alan's sake. Who either created or co-created that particular universe for Wildstorm.
right. Now-
And it was when he insisted that he didn't want to have any character ownership now, which I regret because I wish I owned a bit of Jonni Future. So I like drawing Jonni Future.